Bounty hunters often make for the best antagonists in Star Wars, adding an outlaw feel to the dark side that would be sorely lacking without them. Most Star Wars fans could list several bounty hunters off the top of their heads, from Jango and Boba Fett to Cad Bane and Dirge. These bounty hunters were renowned for their ruthlessness and lethality, which is what makes them such great antagonists. But what if we were to tell you that those bounty hunters were soft compared to some of the hunters of old? In this video, we'll be taking a look back at one of the darkest periods of galactic history when some of the most ruthless bounty hunters of all time reigned supreme.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The four bounty hunters we listed off in the intro, Jango Fett, Boba Fett, Cad Bane and Dirge, were probably the most ruthless bounty hunters of the movie era, at least in Legends. The Fetts were both the greatest bounty hunters of their respective times, willing to go to any length to get a job done. Cad Bane was even more ruthless than both of them, but not quite as effective. Dirge, meanwhile, was genuinely psychotic and absolutely bloodthirsty because of it. Of course, Dirge isn't really known for having been a bounty hunter, rather, he's known for serving as a commander of the CIS during the Clone Wars. But he was still one of the most ruthless bounty hunters of the Clone Wars era. In fact, he probably would have fit with the hunters we'll be talking about later better than he would have fit in with Cad Bane and the Fetts. All of these bounty hunters were merciless and borderline sociopathic, or psychotic in Dirge's case. What's more, none of them belonged to any of the bounty hunter guilds, meaning that the only rules they had to care about were their own. The guilds normally reined in bounty hunters, keeping them on the straight and narrow with rules and honor codes, but free agents like these hunters didn't have to bother with any of that. These bounty hunters weren't just ruthless, but uncontrollable as well, which is a rather dangerous combination if you ask us. But remarkably, even these four bounty hunters followed rules anyway. Dirge was known to operate according to long-term contracts with governments or wannabe governments, notably the New Sith and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. He followed the rules of whatever faction he was working for at any given time, allowing them to limit him. Cad Bane and the Fetts, on the other hand, reined in themselves. The Fetts had a thorough and complex moral code that they followed religiously, and both Jango and Boba had strong senses of honor and duty. Cad Bane liked to profess that his only loyalty was to his bank account, but he too had a moral code and a sense of honor, although much less refined. All of these bounty hunters, as well as pretty much all bounty hunters in the movie era, had a point which they would refuse to kill, a limit to their cruelty. Clone Wars and Imperial era bounty hunters had limits because of the times they were born into. The movie era was a dangerous time, but there was still an underlying sense of stability and order in the galaxy. Even during the height of the Clone Wars, the galaxy was far from total civilizational collapse. The old Sith Wars were a different story. During the old Sith Wars, 4,000 years before the Clone Wars, the galaxy spent 50 years jumping from war to war, and civilization itself was on the very brink of collapse for more than a decade straight. This environment bred bounty hunters that were far more fearsome than any of their movie era counterparts. These sorts of bounty hunters became particularly prominent during the Dark Wars at the end of this period, when most of the galaxy was plunged into varying states of lawlessness. Many of the bounty hunters from this period got their contracts from the Exchange, a notorious criminal syndicate known for being even worse than the Hutts. And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, a who's who of the most ruthless bounty hunters of the old Sith Wars. Let's start with the most well-known hunter from this period, Calo Nord. Now, this dude certainly didn't look like one of the most relentless murderers in the history of the galaxy. With a height of just 1.5 meters, he was a bit of a midget, likely caused by severe malnutrition as a child. His outfit, additionally, can only be described as silly, albeit in a Valentine Fafala sort of way. But when it came to Calo Nord, looks were absolutely deceiving, something many beings learned the hard way. As a young boy, Calo Nord was sold into slavery by his parents and spent most of his childhood being brutally abused. On his 16th birthday, He's celebrated by butchering his masters and escaping, then tracking down his parents to murder them too. A bounty was put on his head, and a good many bounty hunters came after Kalo, but the young man was too cunning for them. He watched as they hunted them, learning their tricks and skills, and then killed all of them, stealing their equipment too. This led to the Bounty Hunters Guild cancelling the contract on him, but Nord hunted down the people who had placed the bounty anyway and murdered them as well. After that, he began a career as a freelance bounty hunter. In case you couldn't tell from that brief snippet of his life story, Kalo Nord killed a lot of people. As a bounty hunter, he was known to regularly kill his targets, but he committed murder as a hobby too, because of course he did. He had a notoriously low tolerance for other people, giving them to the count of 3 to leave him alone before he added them to his extraordinarily long body count. Mission Vow once remarked that Kalo Nord had killed more people than the Iridian Plague, and while that was a hyperbole, he certainly came closer than the vast majority of bounty hunters. Fortunately for the galaxy, Nord was eventually taken down, though it took none other than Revan to finally bring this ruthless killing machine to justice. Speaking of killing machines, some of the most effective bounty hunters of the Dark Wars were the HK-50s. These psychopathic droids were based on the design of HK-47, though they were less effective, had lamer paint jobs, and worst of all, they called meatbags organics. Like HK-47, they were assassin droids, though some HK-50s were known to object that label.
Assassin droid is such a crude term, Master, reserved for Durasteel drones uploaded with only the most archaic kill programs. The function I perform has been referred to as wanton slaughter. I prefer to see it as a means of facilitating communication, resulting in the termination of hostilities.
If you thought Kalo Nord murdering people for talking to him was extreme, then HK-50s were on a different level entirely. The way they saw it, there were countless sentients scattered all over the universe, and they were ripe for murdering. They worked toward accomplishing this by taking up contracts for bounty hunting and assassination, as well as by disguising themselves as protocol droids and deliberately causing diplomatic incidents. The HK-50s were peak chaotic evil, starting wars for fun and deliberately annoying their targets in the hope that it would cause more violence. Our next pair of bounty hunters, the Twin Sons, had an origin story that was very similar to Kalo Nord's. The Twi'lek twins, Sira and Tira, were, like Kalo Nord, sold into slavery at a very young age, and like Kalo, they escaped slavery by murdering their master. Also like Kalo, they became bounty hunters afterwards, but for different reasons. While Kalo committed murder as a means to an end, the Twin Sons enjoyed murder for its own sake and became bounty hunters with the hopes of killing more targets. What's more, these Twi'lek nutcases exclusively used exotic spinning vibroblades to kill their targets, purportedly out of enjoyment of the taste of blood. Lastly, we have a Wookiee you might remember from a video we made last year. Hanha was a bit more tame than the other Dark Wars era bounty hunters we've discussed today, and he did have a sort of honor code, albeit a heavily twisted one, but he was still chillingly ruthless. Hanha was absolutely insane, having been driven to madness after murdering his village and being enslaved by Zerka Corporation. He blamed humans for everything that had happened to him and dedicated his life to making humans suffer. He murdered humans for the hell of it, sold human children into slavery, and wiped out human colonies in his mad quest for revenge. As a bounty hunter, he mostly hunted humans and almost exclusively worked for non-human clients. There was a lot more to Hanha than just bloodthirst, as those who watched our earlier video know, but he was nonetheless one of the most ruthless bounty hunters in galactic history, as were many of his contemporaries. So that's our look at some of the galaxy's most ruthless bounty hunters. But what do you think? Would you like us to make a full video about Kalo Nord, or perhaps the HK-50s? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.